Mayor Wu, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. Great to see you both.
Hey, Mayor Wu, thank you very much, as always, for coming in and spending time with us.
If you want to call the mayor or text the mayor a question, you can do it at 877-301-8970. If you're at the library and would like to ask her a question face-to-face, you go see Zoe or Tamsin, two of our colleagues, and there's a decent chance you get to ask that question. Would you leave the baby in a shopping cart? Where's the baby? Where's the baby?
Nowadays, part of the reason why I'm often holding the baby is because I have her, someone needs to hold her, she's with me. And the other part is she easily covers up spit-up stains. I don't have the cover up today.
Okay.
It's good to see you.
So Mayor Wu, I'm just wondering what the impact, what are your concerns or maybe not concerns or with the Trump administration? A lot of, dramatic cuts all around the country and right here in Massachusetts and Boston. So what's this going to mean, do you think?
Where do we start? I am submitting our administration's budget to the City Council tomorrow morning officially. And even in setting that budget, every piece of consideration went into how we have to adjust what we do, because at the local level and at the state level, we're having to guard against or try to respond to or fill in the gaps or protect the harm that we are seeing. And it's not just the potential cuts that have been attempted and some of which have been stopped by the legal system so far and some of which may or may not make it through the legal system. It's not just the jobs that have had to be slashed already in the federal government that impact people's livelihoods here, the threats and attacks on higher education and healthcare and our hospital system, research. I mean, so much of what Boston is known for and what makes Boston strong is what makes our country strong and is what this administration is trying to tear down. But I think the worst part of it all, worse than all of the horrible things and the approaches to trying to divide people and intimidate and isolate, is the uncertainty of it. That it's such a chaotic environment where a policy is announced, right, where he's doing tariffs, and then he doesn't have to do tariffs on your country if you come to the table and offer something special in some kind of, potentially corrupt exchange. And so then what's real, what's not real, companies are trying to decide if they keep shipping their products or wait until the tariff is not happening. And then everything just is grounded in this sense of unpredictability where you can't plan around it. So we are having, most of all, to plan for the unplannable. And that means really having a cushion, tightening our belt at the city to prepare for the worst case scenario, but also not jumping ahead to assume that that will happen, because that would involve slashing city services and cutting, in fact, what residents most need right now.
Do you know, I think you said that we get $300 million from the feds. Do you know what changes you would make should that $300 million disappear?
We are doing some scenario planning, as many cities are, around what different levels of immediate cuts would have to be. For a city budget where most of our resources go directly to the workforce that delivers the services, that would mean layoffs and hiring freezes. We are not there yet right now, again, not jumping ahead, and it may very well come to that, but I am going to manage as hard as I possibly can for Boston to avoid that, because these are really critical services that underpin what makes our community healthy and safe and thriving.
Our number, if you want to speak to the mayor directly, is 877-301-8970. One other thing, you've mentioned a few times already what our community is known for, what makes our community what it is. If you were a foreign student called you on the phone and said, I was thinking of coming to BU or BC or Harvard or UMass, Boston, wherever, I'm having serious doubts about whether or not I'll be safe there, based on the stories we've read about Ms. Ozturk at Tufts. We know all these people being snatched. What would you say to that young person?
I would say that for my own family story, I know how important immigration is, how much this country represents opportunity that is unreachable anywhere else, and it is so painful to see that in this current federal administration being trampled on in just about every way. and that in Boston and with our institutions, we're going to do our very best to hold the federal government to the law, to civil rights, to protections that are established so that people can be safe and can access the sense of opportunity and American dream here. We cannot control the federal government, but we are going to do everything possibly within our power to make sure that Boston continues to be Boston.
So should I come or should I not come?
I mean, it's a personal decision for everyone. We want everyone to still see our city as a home. We want to, obviously, people are going to have to think carefully about the type of protections and contingencies as we are here as well. So I guess the biggest point for me is that we shouldn't just think of this as, quote, the problem for international students or the problem for, quote unquote, those people who might not have paperwork or documentation. We're at a point where we are not sure if constitutional rights are being respected. We obviously don't want to jump to conclusions, but the stories and the anecdotal information we're hearing from community members in Boston and the proof that we're seeing in other communities where people are being wrongly detained and deported, where people who have no criminal record whatsoever are being taken as quote unquote collateral damage. This is not what even voters who might have a more conservative leaning were promised when this administration was campaigning. This is mass deportation that is wreaking havoc on our economy and our global relationships. And it seems that there's a significant chance this is violating civil rights and constitutional law. We need to be sure that there's transparency around this. We've been working with our Office of Police Accountability and Transparency in the city, which was set up to ensure that Boston police are following all protocols and held accountable if there were instances of misconduct, that we can work with community groups who have set up a separate hotline to report instances related to ICE and federal immigration officials, and that there can be some ongoing communication and collaboration around who plays what role and how do we also help document what is happening so that there's some sense of the facts and a way to ensure that, to check whether all the laws are being followed.
Our number is 877, if you want to speak to the mayor, 301-8970.
One more thing about the Trump administration before we get to the cause. You're a Harvard alum. The Trump administration is threatening $9 billion, taking away money if they don't kowtow to his demands in this, which a lot of people are calling kind of a weaponization of anti-Semitism. It really isn't about anti-Semitism. It's about controlling these institutions. And Harvard has a decision to make about how much they're willing to kowtow to his demands. What do you think Harvard should do?
Well, I think, as you pointed out, there's some question about the motivation behind these investigations and current actions. Even so, it's really important to call out anti-Semitism and discrimination of every type. And Boston has been historically a home for thriving, vibrant Jewish communities who have played a huge role in our city and continue to have a very strong partnership with the city. And we've been in close communication with many of the organizations and leaders in the Jewish community just to ensure that we are taking steps that align with what our community members also want to see. Because as you know, the city of Boston has also received that same request from the Trump administration's anti-Semitism task force to be investigated. We have asked repeatedly for their information on sort of vague statements that they've made about troubling situations within the city of Boston. We have not received that yet and hope to have a productive conversation based on the information that they are referring to. Haven't gotten that yet. Part of the staff will be in town from that task force tomorrow to meet with staff at the city, and so we will ask again for that in preparation potentially for a larger meeting down the line. But in terms of Harvard, I hope that I know how much is on the line for hospitals, for universities,
Mass General,
for cities,
Brigham,
for law firms,
yeah.
But we've seen that even those who try to cut a deal, when you do that, they still come down on on delivering harm, and then it cuts out everyone else in your field because they're trying to isolate and weaken and silence each one individually so that people will just stop speaking out about the outrageous things that are happening. Again, many which seem to be illegal at this point. So we locally, Wilmer Hale, one of our big law firms, stood up, went to court, and said they were going to fight the executive order that was targeted at them instead of cutting a deal like other law firms have. And the court, for now, has paused that executive order while they sort it out. So I would encourage institutions who have resources to use those to try to fight for what is right, because there are so many in our community who cannot feel safe doing so. If you are an undocumented member of our community, if you are an employee of the federal government, we can't expect people to speak out for their own livelihoods and their own lives when they're putting everything at risk, when so many other institutions who have a platform, who have resources, can do so and need to do so in this moment.
Let's take some calls. And actually, there's some people. Actually, let's start with somebody at the library. Tiffany, wherever Tiffany is. As Tiffany is walking over, let's take a call. Chris and JP, you're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah, you're on.
I appreciate what the mayor did to make a plan. And just first, thank you for what you've been doing at White Stadium. But on to immigration. I appreciate the work of your immigrant welcoming office.
Hey, Chris, you have a horrible connection. You have two choices. We can put you on hold, or you can just go right to your question. I'm sorry, but
Is this better?
we're losing every other word. Say it again.
Is this better?
Yep, it is.
Is this better?
It is,
Yes.
thank you.
I appreciate the work that the mayor has done with White Stadium. So just thank you for that. It'll be a great improvement. Speaking on immigration, I've seen in community health centers, they're getting messages to their people about their rights. But I'm hearing from the larger hospitals that they're opening the doors to ICE. And I really want to encourage the mayor to get the message to all the institutions in the city about protecting their workers and the community from these attacks on them.
We got it, Chris.
So-
You want to respond to any of that, Mayor Wu?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for speaking out as well. We are in constant communication with institutions across the city, and I think what's important, and maybe each one could phrase this in a different way, or there could be better consistency across the board. I think everyone is wanting to communicate to their staff and visitors or patients, et cetera, that first and foremost it's important to follow the law. And just as we know that some of the things that are happening might be crossing that line, there is also a line that we in Boston can't cross around obstruction of justice or obstruction of enforcement efforts that fall within the federal government's purview. So I think different institutions are trying to communicate that in different ways. We've been very clear, for example, in the Boston Public Schools, that should there be some effort, there needs to be a warrant, and we do not, in any cases, let adults who are not authorized to connected to a school community to come into a school building. So how you phrase it, how you communicate it, and most of all, how you're reaching the most impacted residents is really important, and we all need to do better on getting those messages out there.
Tiffany is now at the mic at the library. Welcome, Tiffany. How are you?
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning,
Good morning.
Mayor Wu. Thank you for, first of all, everything that you're doing. So many of us were watching you while you were in Washington defending the rights of people who don't have a platform, as you mentioned.
Go ahead, Tiffany.
So we're talking a lot about the pressures that the federal government is levying against cities and states, particularly like Boston, who are taking a stand around liberation and freedoms. And while we know you're very busy with that, So I'm from the Boston Cyclists Union, and want to talk really intentionally and transparently about the removal of the flex post. That was an unannounced and didn't really give advocates and community members that work so hard to get these infrastructural improvements installed. So what would you like to say to the community who uses these protected bike lanes and depends on the safety of these flex posts? Because there was no confirmation, there was no communication prior to.
Tiffany, thanks.
Thank you for being here. Tiffany, I'll ask you a question just to make sure we're on the same page, because I think sometimes the information can get sort of pulled or communicated in different ways. How many feet of flex posts, in your understanding, were removed that then exposed a bike lane that wasn't otherwise protected? Do you know?
Oh, can you turn the mic back on for Tiffany, please? Do you know?
I don't know
Okay,
the actual
so,
footage.
so this is important because I went out there because I wanted myself to see exactly what had happened. And we're talking about Mass Ave, which is
Yes.
the place that I think many advocates and cyclists are referring to.
Yeah.
And Mass Ave, in the last several years, we're very proud to have added a protected cycle lane there. Even as I was out there, it was middle of the day, maybe around 1 p.m. or something like that. Multiple cyclists using it, very busy, going both directions. The cycle lane is protected by concrete barriers all the way down. Those concrete barriers had posts sticking out the top of them, some of which were in okay shape, some of which had been crumpled, etc. And there was one place that was maybe a 20-foot stretch that flex posts had not been in concrete barriers and were directly into the ground that had been removed. That was a mistake not to have the concrete barrier replacing that. And so that is being put back, or hopefully, if not already, will be put back soon, so that the entire stretch, including that 20-foot segment, will be protected. But it wasn't a removal of a bike lane. It wasn't a sort of overall decision that we are going to quietly reverse infrastructure that had been put in to create a safe way and separation. I want to be clear that I have, now do, and always will support bike lanes and separated infrastructure as the safest way for people to get around. We need our roads to work for everyone, for pedestrians, for drivers, and for cyclists. But it is also undeniable that in spaces that I'm out and about all across the city, in rooms with seniors, in rooms with our disability community, with small businesses, almost across the board in every neighborhood, we are now at a point where we have been in the progress of building out our bike network for the last 15 years as a city, and now it is extensive because we've done such a good job of getting things quickly into the ground to save lives and to protect people. The way that it has been done, I think, has often prioritized speed and therefore getting those safe separation into the ground, rather than taking into account should there be a slight tweak in the design so that delivery trucks can also access the curb for the businesses, or spaces where we need to think about accessibility for other residents, or parking, which is a necessity for many in different communities. We need to be at a point where we are holistically improving how we do this, because it is a citywide concern right now that the cycle lanes have been causing traffic or causing inconvenience or hurting economically, this and that. Now, again, safety is the top priority for everyone. And when we install bike lanes, we make the streets safer for everyone. But how we do what we do really matters. And we need to get to a place where the materials that we use, the processes that we go through, the conversations that we have really do incorporate the holistic needs of the community, and it's not just a one and done and we move on to the next place. We are going through and making sure to ask community members, just as we would in any other policy area, has this actually been doing what it was intended to do? Where it has, let's make that infrastructure permanent. Let's go from flex posts that can be knocked over and then are like litter on the ground because they get crumpled and messed up. Let's take the resources and build out a sidewalk level separated bike lane like the Southwest Corridor, or like different places in the Seaport where even drivers say it just feels so much better. And in a corridor like American Legion, where It was a very dangerous two-lane straightaway that was a frequent place for crashes to happen from drag racing. The roadway was narrowed. It is much safer now. It's been working well, but it is such a large sea of flex posts all the way down and such a large expanse on the other side of those posts that we should really have conversations. Is it about building it out and having green and trees installed? Is it about moving that cycle track up on the sidewalks? Other changes? We can't just stay stuck in this, what was intended to be fast, cheap, tactical to evaluate whether it worked. Let's take it to the next phase now as a city and have our infrastructure that prioritizes safety, includes everyone's need in the community, and also reflects our long-term commitment to doing this right.
Thank you for your call. You know, your question, in related things, I think if you were to stop, this is not scientific, but if you were to stop Bostonians on the street and ask what have been some of the major priorities of this mayor, they'd say things like included free buses, the T, bike lanes. You didn't mention any of them in your state of the city
I mentioned
remarks.
buses.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
The bike lanes and the T, why not, considering how important they are to you?
Yeah, I mean, I did not want to go on forever. There are many, many other things that I also could have mentioned, but I think if the question is really, am I as committed to moving forward on these issues, or are they as big of a motivator for the next 4 years as they were over these current 4 years? I would say there are a couple things that are important. One, absolutely, we need to be moving forward, as I was just saying to Tiffany, on making sure that our infrastructure and our streets are safe for everyone, are convenient, and transportation is reliable. The T is a huge, huge part of that. Two, I'm very proud to say, in a different place now than 4 years ago. With General Manager Eng at the helm, the T has now eliminated slow zones in a period of, it was very painful, shutdowns and doing that construction, but they got it done. And there's still improvements that are now needed for signals and other parts of the infrastructure that are very old, but we are in a just much better place now in terms of MBTA reliability. And I will say that I will, obviously the work of the state, the governor, the Healy administration, Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt, and the general manager have gotten it done. But I will brag a little bit on behalf of the city of Boston that prior to this gubernatorial administration, prior to General Manager Eng, when there was an approach at the state level that was just, let's try to, where we can, shut the T down for an hour overnight on the weekends when it's least disruptive, that approach was going to take more than 40 years to get through the slow zones. And we made a fuss in Boston, and we put our resources on the table to say, do it right, do it fast, and we will make sure that above ground, as you do the work underground and then need to have shuttles and alternative transportation above ground, that we will put our City of Boston resources to making that possible. And we have. We've staffed up transportation staff whose job is to support and be the liaison to the T, to help oversee when shutdowns need bus routes to be drawn differently or changes on our roadways to accommodate that. And we really pushed to get that first Orange Line shutdown to happen. It mixed results on what exactly it did and whether it worked all the way then. We've had to go back and fix some of that. But it did get us started as a society, as a community, on this approach of I think recognizing that it is worth it to do things urgently, and the public understands that we're trying to get it right and that we will need to have some short-term inconvenience in order to get the long-term system that we need.
Our number is 877-301-8970.
Mayor Wu, one of the themes emerging from the election is that in democratic cities, it takes, speaking about 40 years to do something. It takes too long to get anything done, including building more housing. And Sean, in Boston, who texts, he was reading Ezra Klein's new book, Abundance. It's about this theme. He talks about how blue city mayors have really prevented housing production, too many rules, regulations, and red tape, while cities like Austin have an abundance of housing. As someone who makes well into six figures, that's Sean. He says he can't afford to buy a home in Boston. He's feeling very discouraged and disenchanted with Democrats and their commitment to bureaucratic red tape. So is there a way to maybe speed all this up? Because he's got a point.
Yeah. First, just in terms of the exact permitting process and all that, we are working really hard to speed all of that up. I had signed an executive order to cut in half the amount of time it takes to approve an affordable housing proposal, and the findings, we're about 30% faster now. By the end of this calendar year, we'll be 50% faster than when this was signed, and we're taking those learnings and speeding up the entire process. We are streamlining through new zoning citywide for the first time since 1965. We are reforming the Article 80 approvals process for large-scale development for the first time in 30 years since that code was written. So we are trying to do all of that. However, I would still push back a little bit on the overall idea that if we just make it easy for anyone to build anything anytime they want, that eventually it trickles down to the affordability that we need. That has not proven to be the case, and it is because, one, Boston is part of a larger system. So we have been overperforming on the city's own housing production goals for the last 10, 15 years. But when all of the surrounding communities aren't on the same pace to produce housing, and people live, freely, working in one city, commuting to another, back and forth, we could build much, much, much more housing even faster than we're doing now. And if no one else is building housing in the immediate area, it still means that rents in Boston won't come down because we're part of this larger metro area. So I really applaud the governor and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general for focusing on housing production as a statewide issue. Transportation is definitely a piece of that. And if we can have fast, reliable, affordable, statewide transportation, that will make a difference as well. But we've been focused on not just housing production in Boston, using city-owned land, reforming our zoning code, making things faster, providing incentives for developers to convert from unused office buildings to residential, nearly 1,000 units that we'll see happening through that, and we're expanding the program. But we also have to focus specifically on affordability because it's not just one to the other in the very complicated market that we have. And so under our administration, Sheila Dillon, our chief of housing, we have created more affordable housing in the last 3 years than in the last 25 years. That's been a dogged, relentless focus on funding, providing the financing gaps, filling the gaps in private projects that are affordable. We've created a new revolving loan fund, so we're taking some of the city's resources, putting it out to use. It will get paid back to the city to go to another set of projects. And we raised the affordability expectations because we cannot have another building boom at any point in the future when the national and international markets resolve, where luxury housing gets built, Boston doesn't get our share of affordable. At stake right now, as part of the mayor's race, there is a conversation where some want to undo those affordability requirements and go back to a time when, in fact, that wouldn't unlock the pipeline because all of those projects were permitted under the old rules. So there's some confusion and misinformation out there, but we're working to get all of the projects that are permitted going and then make sure that the new development is healthy, green, energy efficient, and meets our housing needs.
So you don't buy developers' line that affordable housing requirements make it too difficult for them to make a profit?
It's a very tough time to build right now, and I don't want to discount how hard it is for those who have put their life savings into the real estate market and are trying to put food on the table for their families as well. But I will say that interest rates drive this more than anything else. We are not just seeing the difference between what's happening in Boston and what's happening in cities around the country when it comes to a slowdown is connected to larger macroeconomic factors. We're also a very challenging place to build because our land is limited. Cities like Austin, cities in the south or the southeast or other parts of the country have wide swaths of land where they can build new roads and build from scratch cheaply. We are talking about complicated urban redevelopment in a very congested area that has to be done right, and it has to be done with respect to the history and what makes Boston special as a city that goes back 400 years as well.
We only have 30 seconds before we take a break. One Boston. Can you tell people what's happening this year?
Oh, yes. Okay. I have some details here. So as always, April 15th is the day where we reflect on the tragedy of the Boston Marathon bombings in 2013 and how that sparked a push to help others and to be involved in your community. So we're encouraging acts of kindness. Tuesday, April 15th, we will have a neighborhood cleanup. Saturday, April 19th, connected to this as well. And if you go to the website, we have suggestions for things that you could do, ways that you could be involved. But please be part of our community then. Take care of each other every day, but especially on that day. Go out of your way to do something nice for someone else, and think about how we can be even more connected in a time when we really need connection.
By the way, an anonymous texter says, stock market is doing pretty good today, Jim, huh? Medicine is working. And I would say to that person, yeah, it's only down 10 trillion rather than 11 trillion. Now, one of the texters here says, why won't you interview Josh Kraft? I assume that's trolling because, as we've said 100 times, we've tried to get one of your opponents to physically show up here with no luck. So all I can do is quote him. Here's what he said about Masson Cass, as you know, in the last couple of days. A public safety threat that the mayor, meaning you, does not want to talk about because she does not know how to fix it. What's your response to Kraft?
Well, I will say I am constantly seeking ways that the city could be doing more on the challenges that really matter, and what has been happening at Mass Ave and Melnia Cass with the overlap of the opioid crisis, mental health, and substance use has been one of those huge challenges for the city for a very long time. And I would add that it's not just about the Mass and Cass area, but impacting neighborhoods everywhere. Some of what has been put forward in this so-called plan is are items that already have been in progress, and that the police department and our public health commission and the city have already implemented. Some are points that we have evaluated and do not believe would move us in the right direction. But overall, I think what's concerning here is that this isn't a new issue, and we're not parachuting into a conversation. I've had the chance as a city councilor and now as mayor to be involved from day one. And within the first 2 months of our administration, this was the #1 challenge that we took action on and worked to build up low threshold housing for the first time ever, connect people to recovery and treatment, and we're able to remove the encampments for 200 people who had been living on the streets for years because we were able to set up the system to holistically address everyone's needs. Since then, certainly the challenge continues to evolve because people continue to come to Boston, and we see the need growing. We have been working in every phase to engage with our community members. We've reformed how the police staffing structure works. We have passed ordinances. We've now no more permanent encampments in the city of Boston, which has been enforced very smoothly with a public health approach to it. And we are also now tackling the idea that congregate outdoor substance use should not be happening because that is a public safety harm and people aren't getting the services that they need.
There's another person who was almost an opponent of yours, Tom O'Brien, a big developer in the city. Shirley Young wrote a piece, she admits speculative afterwards, saying she wonders whether the Kraft family either made a threat or cut a deal with O'Brien, or whether the mayor of Boston made a threat or cut a deal with O'Brien. Did anybody on your staff or you have any discussions with O'Brien or his people about who's dropping out of the race?
No, I spoke with Tom once. He had reached out right after the first article came out, but I have not did not cut a deal or anything like that.
877-301-8970.
Helen in Quincy, thank you for calling the mayor. You're on the phone.
Hi,
You're on
Helen.
the phone with her.
Hello, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have been subjected to discrimination in one of the departments in City Hall, and I want to know where a person turns to try to resolve this situation and have it addressed.
Could I, well, maybe I could follow up afterwards, so you don't have to answer this question here. But what I'll say, if you could stay on the line, we'll get your information. It would be helpful to know if it was employment discrimination or in somewhere where you were trying to access city services, or what the exact context was, because it might be different people in that case. But we would love to connect you to the right place.
Helen, don't go away. We're going to get your contact information and share it with the mayor's people, so stay there.
We have Diana at the Boston Public Library. She has a question about the protest, I think, on on Saturday. Here's Diana.
Hi, Diana.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to see your baby here with some foster parents that were holding her. It was lovely. I was at the Boston Common for the Hands Off protest Saturday. I heard it was around 10,000 people were estimating. And then that night it was estimated to be maybe 100,000 people showed between being at the Common and being at City Hall. And the next day someone said, oh, it's about 30,000. Several newspapers didn't cover the protest, and somebody put it on the 18th page, I heard. Do you think the protest was effective?
Well, thank you for being there. I had the chance to see the crowd myself from the stage at the City Hall Plaza stop, and it was larger than any crowd I've ever seen assembled in that area. So I think the numbers definitely reflected, even with the rain, even with sort of crummy weather, people were energized, and it made a difference. This is just my own personal view because I can't get in the heads of the Republican lawmakers or administration, but I would say that at some level, every elected official, every one who works in government is responsive to what the public is communicating. And you might not be responsive to a rally happening outside your jurisdiction or this or that, but it matters. And for so long it had felt that, my daughter is now almost 3 months old. Her birthday, she came into the world a week before the inauguration, so in some ways I have an easy count of how long we've been going through this administration. And it felt that for the first part of her life, almost the entire first few months, there was this sense of, should we really say anything? Because there's so much retaliation threatened, there's so much at stake, and is the right thing to do just to try to not provoke more of it and just put your head down and weather it? And I think we've seen, again, in sector after sector, law, college, higher education, healthcare, public sector, private sector, that when you just keep trying to survive, it only makes it worse from a bully. And now that some people are speaking out, more people are speaking out, and the more that we finally get to see visibly what the public actually thinks about what's happening, I do think that matters. And if anything, if nothing else, in terms of Washington, even just here locally in Boston and in Massachusetts, to keep the pressure on us to say we have to do more. It's not enough just to try to be the city that is, speaking out a little bit or talking about the harms that are happening. Do something about it. Use the powers that we have in local government, in the state legislature and the state house, to take every possible step right now, because again, there are many people who cannot speak out, and when we see those numbers, we know that they have to reflect even more who are behind that. So please keep it going. The other thing I always would recommend in terms of, at least at the local level, if you get involved, be specific as well. Right? There are ways, yes, speaking out. I am opposed to different things that are happening. I don't, the White House isn't following what I'm saying to implement it. But if you come to the city of Boston with a specific proposal, or if you go to the State House, or if you go to any other municipality with a specific proposal, that is how government is supposed to work, to evaluate the needs and the ideas that are out there in the community. And we have to be the beacon where we're still making progress and moving forward as a counterpoint and potentially even the antidote to some of what's happening nationally.
Mayor Wu, a couple of months ago when you were here, we asked you about a report on former City Councilor Michael Flaherty being dismissed at the Water and Sewer Commission. And there were charges of cronyism and racism. You said it was 2 months ago you were not involved in any of that. Last month we asked you again. You said you were going to spend more time delving into the details, going under the hood to see what's happening. Since those original charges, the Globe just reported use of a private use of a public car is also alleged. Have you had an opportunity to look into this at all?
I have gone through some of the files and have been in conversation with the commission. The employment relationship is no longer there, and so I think some of what we are seeing is not under consideration for further action because former Councilor Flaherty is no longer employed there.
But he got a huge payout. Do you think that was appropriate in retrospect, now that you've reviewed some of the information?
Again, the commission has their own HR and purview to decide what they decide. I think my sense is that there's always a consideration around the potential for litigation or other processes to result in a greater use of city resources, and often coming to terms with a change in the employment relationship has to be done in the best interest of how city resources are used.
877-301-8970.
Joey in Boston, thank you for calling. You're on with Mayor Wu.
Hey, Joey.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Wu and
Morning.
Jim and Marjorie.
Hi, Joey.
First of all, I was at your launch event the other day for the campaign. I am so proud and grateful that you are my mayor, and I am excited to watch these next 2 months as we get you reelected, from students to hospitality workers, get you reelected because you have earned that spot, and we got to keep you there. I am calling because a lot of students are scared right now here in Boston. I go to Suffolk, and I've come from a pretty privileged place overall, so I'm really asking this for the students who maybe wouldn't feel comfortable asking the question. The students are scared, some of them even to go to the hands-off protest the other day. I was there, but I noticed students who just didn't feel comfortable given DEI programs getting attacked, student visas being revoked for our international students, education is being attacked at all levels. We even saw the Trump administration try to abolish the Department of Ed when they're not even reading their own signal chats. And so what I want to ask is, how can students use their voice and get involved when education is getting attacked and when our students are getting scared? Can you just give us some hope and maybe some guidance in such a difficult moment?
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I so appreciate your support, and I'm really excited about the chance to keep the conversation in Boston strong when it comes to what we can do, and exactly what you're asking about, not just feeling like something's wrong, but how to do something about it. So what comes to my mind, two different things. Well, first of all, showing up always matters, and it doesn't have to be at a mass demonstration or a protest. It could be at a city council meeting. It could be at a neighborhood association meeting. It could be at the board meeting of a nonprofit that's committed to a cause that you care about. So there are many, many ways to be involved and to strengthen the kind of civic infrastructure across our city. So many opportunities and entry points. I think when it comes to politics and policies in particular, here are two other ideas that I have. One, again, if it's not the right pathway to be the front person at a protest or a rally, although, power to those who are leading the way on that front, you could try to be involved on the inside. Come intern for City Hall, for example, or volunteer your time to, again, an organization that might be tackling an issue that's really important, whether it's research that you can contribute, or administrative work, or just helping spread the word on social media, or doing some of the back-end work. There are lots and lots of great organizations that are understaffed right now and facing a lot of pressure and could use that extra human power. And then the second thing, which is somewhat different, is stories also really matter. Some of what has fueled the silence and fear is this sense that things are going to happen this way no matter what, and there's nothing we can do about it because there's a majority in this country that voted this way. I think we're starting to see in different parts of the country and in some of the news headlines that are coming out that many people voted because they were frustrated with how life was not going well, how costs are too high, how government didn't seem responsive. And it wasn't necessarily for a particular set of actions or this or that. And even if it was for a particular direction in immigration, it still shocks the conscience when good, decent human beings are being pulled out of their lives or subjected to potentially unconstitutional, removed from protections that we all believe are basic to our humanity. And when you have examples of that happening, it matters when people know about real people who have experienced real things. It matters for us to then be able to anchor our frustration to something that is factual and based in evidence that can't be refuted. Now, people might need to tell their stories anonymously in some cases, but helping to connect with those organizations that are advocating, that can go a long way as well. Share your own story. Why do you feel so passionate and motivated? And help empower and inspire others to then feel like they can do something about it too.
Thanks for that. By the way, I was going to ask you, or Marjorie was, about your the new website for the 250th anniversary, but then all of a sudden, an anonymous texter with a related question. With American 250 coming, can the mayor weigh in on secession? Boston with Massachusetts and other states now. So you can answer either question or both if you'd like, Mayor Wu.
I saw some people on Blue Sky posting about New England, which was an interesting concept. You know, we are in a country of laws and a country that was founded on the revolutionary ideals of justice and equality and freedom, although it has taken time to continue expanding who that actually applies to, and we have more work to do. But it's pretty remarkable that the same streets we walk on today, the same sites and grass that we walk on is rooted in the very individuals who took up this cause. I heard a talk by Professor Robert Allison, who's based in South Boston, and this is his specialty. And when we were celebrating the Evacuation Day commemoration, 250 years or 249 years of Evacuation Day, he talked about how today, those of us in 2025 looking back at history, we can trace how one set of frustrations led to a protest, led to action, led to a skirmish, led to a battle, and then over the course of 8 years, those residents of Boston helped build a new country. But those residents of Boston 250 years ago didn't know that that's where they were headed when they first started taking those actions. They didn't know that the chain of events that would be triggered. They were just trying to do the next right thing to protect their families and to fight for the people that they loved. And I think there's some lesson for us right now in this moment. It can feel impossible sometimes. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like we don't know the exact roadmap or pathway of how we're going to get to the outcome that we want to get to. But if we do the next right thing for our communities, for our neighbors, for our families, we will be doing the next right thing for history. Boston has always taken that role in our country and in our world's history. So if you go to boston.gov/250, we are kicking off the official commemorations. It's April 18th is the official kickoff, 250 years since Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. And in these 250 years, it's not just about old stuff and things that happened long ago. It's the idea that we were willing to speak out, to try to do what's right, to try to change the circumstances for the people we care about. We need that sense of innovation and love and community today, and we are going to keep it going as we commemorate our 250th and our role in this country's founding.
So before you go, last year you played Mozart at the BSO. Andres Nelson's going to be here at 1:30. Are you playing second base this year?
Oh yes,
what is that?
This is the
Oh, it's a gift?
special gift
Yes.
for today.
We love that.
Okay, I
Thank
have to
you.
explain this. I have
You have a minute.
These are really special because every year the Red Sox distribute a hat, a special hat, to every single student in the Boston Public Schools. So more than 40,000 BPS hats go out on BPS hat days. It's a special design that only BPS students have, and so now it's BPS plus Jim and Marjorie who have it. But I love when I see young people wearing these hats all around the city. It's their sense of belonging. It's that we're all on the same team here in Boston, and you can always pick out. Sometimes, you know, I've been outside the city of Boston and run into someone. You always know that that person is on your team and that we're going to take care of each other. So thanks to the Red Sox and thanks to all of the institutions who find ways to connect all of us, starting from instilling that in our youngest learners.
Did you take into account that Marjorie and I have the single biggest heads in Boston? Or
Yeah.
It's
were you not
adjustable.
able to do that? It's
Jim's is
adjustable.
assuredly Jim's is bigger than mine.
Not by a lot. Mayor Wu, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you
See
very much,
next
Mayor
month.
Wu,
Thank
very
you so
much.
Thank
much.
you.